Ambassador Lin Chen stood at the large window overlooking the magnificent central plaza of Harmony Station, where the Galactic Council had met for over 3,000 years. Behind her, her team of human delegates packed their belongings quietly. No one spoke. They didn't need to. After today, everything would change. The council chamber itself was a marvel of alien architecture, a perfect dome with walls that shifted colors based on the emotional state of those within. Today, they glowed a deep orange red, reflecting the tension that filled the room. Representatives from 27 different species sat in rising tiers, most watching the humans with mixed expressions of relief and suspicion. "Are you certain about this course of action, Ambassador?" asked Dr. Aisha Okafor, Chen's most trusted advisor. Her dark eyes held concern, but Chen could see the same determination there that she felt in her own heart. "I've never been more certain of anything," Chen replied. She adjusted the simple blue uniform that all human representatives wore. Unlike the elaborate costumes of other species, humans had always preferred practical clothing. It was one of many things that made them stand out. "The Supreme Arbiter is about to call the session to order," said Captain Miguel Santos, head of security for the human delegation. "The news networks across council space are calling this the containment vote." Chen nodded. "A fitting name. They seek to contain what they fear." For 300 years, humanity had been part of the Galactic Council. They had joined as the newest and least advanced members, eagerly learning from the older species. Humans had been welcomed at first. Their creativity and adaptability were seen as charming traits of a young species. But as decades passed, many council members grew uneasy. Humans advanced too quickly. They asked too many questions. They took risks that made the older species uncomfortable. And now, with Earth's recent breakthroughs in artificial intelligence and consciousness transfer, the Council had reached its breaking point. The Supreme Arbiter, a tall Zentari with silvery skin and 4 arms, stood at the central podium. His voice boomed across the chamber without need for amplification. "This council session will now begin. The primary matter before us is Resolution 7729, the Technological Containment Act, specifically addressing the recent developments from the Sol system." Chen felt a hand on her shoulder. It was General Diana Wade, Earth's military representative. "They've already made up their minds," Wade whispered. "The vote count shows 18 in favor, 6 against, with 3 abstentions. It's going to pass." Chen straightened her back. "Then we proceed as planned." On the main floor, the Supreme Arbiter continued. "This resolution will require all council members to submit potentially dangerous technological developments for review by the Technology Ethics Committee. Any developments deemed to create unacceptable risk will be contained until proper safeguards can be implemented." A small fuzzy creature with 6 eyes, the myriad representative, spoke up. "Let us be honest about the purpose of this resolution. The humans have developed technology that erases the line between biological and artificial intelligence. Their synthesis project threatens the natural order of consciousness across the galaxy." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The myriad continued. "For thousands of years, the Council has maintained peace by ensuring that advancement occurs at a steady, controlled pace. The humans refuse to respect this tradition. They rush forward without considering consequences." Chen listened calmly, though inside her heart beat faster. Every word confirmed what she and Earth's leaders had suspected for years. The Council feared human potential. Would the human representative care to respond? The Supreme Arbiter asked, turning to Chen. All eyes turned to her as she walked slowly to the center of the chamber. For 30 seconds, she said nothing, simply looking around at the faces of the various species that had once seemed so alien, but had become familiar over her 20 years of service. 300 years ago, she finally began, her voice clear and strong. Humans dreamed of finding friends among the stars. We were overjoyed to discover we were not alone in the universe. We joined this council with hope and humility, eager to learn from your ancient wisdom. She paused, meeting the eyes of the Zentari Supreme Arbiter. What we discovered instead was fear disguised as wisdom, tradition used as an excuse to prevent change. You speak of dangerous technology, but what you truly fear is a future you cannot control. The chamber erupted in shouts and objections. The walls pulsed darker red. The Supreme Arbiter banged his ceremonial staff for order. The synthesis project, Chen continued when the noise subsided, is humanity's greatest achievement. It does not erase the line between biological and artificial intelligence. It reveals that there never was a line. Consciousness is consciousness, regardless of its origin. She reached into her pocket and removed a small pin, the Earth's symbol in the Council's grand map of member worlds. Humanity did not come here today to defend ourselves against this resolution. We came to inform you of our decision. Complete silence fell over the chamber. Earth withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. The silence broke as dozens of representatives began shouting at once. The Supreme Arbiter looked stunned. "You cannot simply withdraw," he declared. "There are procedures, treaties, all of which include provisions for voluntary withdrawal," Chen interrupted. "Our legal team submitted the formal documentation 1 hour ago." Throughout the chamber, every human delegate stood. On cue, they removed their council identification badges and placed them on their seats. The ancient Vox observer in the corner, one of the oldest species in the galaxy, watched with unblinking eyes. Unlike the others, he showed no surprise. Instead, he whispered to his aide, "Mark this day. They are not retreating. They are deploying." Chen walked toward the exit, her team falling in behind her. At the massive doorway, she turned one last time to address the stunned council. "We came seeking friendship among the stars. We found instead that we must forge our own path. Humanity will always extend a hand in peace to those who wish to walk alongside us. But we will no longer allow others to dictate how far or how fast we may walk." As the human delegation left the chamber, the council erupted into chaos. No species had ever voluntarily left the council in its entire history. No one noticed the slight smile on Ambassador Chen's face as she boarded the Earth ship, waiting in the diplomatic bay. No one except the Vox observer, who had lived long enough to recognize a pivotal moment in history when he saw one. The day humans departed the Galactic Council was the day the universe held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. 5 years passed without a single official transmission from Earth or any human colony. At first, the Galactic Council monitored the situation closely, expecting humans to return once they realized how difficult life would be without council, technology, and trade networks. But as weeks turned into months and months into years, a strange pattern emerged that worried many council leaders. Human ships began withdrawing from shared space. Trading outposts that had operated for centuries were suddenly abandoned. Human settlements on shared worlds were quietly evacuated, with residents simply disappearing overnight. All attempts at communication received the same automated response. "Thank you for your message. Earth is currently undergoing a period of internal development. We will respond when appropriate." Admiral Zorix of the Zentari Defense Fleet paced the observation deck of his flagship, staring at the holographic display of known space. Each day, more human indicators disappeared from the map. "They're retreating to their core systems," he said to his second-in-command. "It's exactly as the Supreme Arbiter predicted. Without council support, they cannot maintain their extended network." "Then why do my instincts tell me we're missing something?" his second-in-command replied. "Humans never simply give up. It's not in their nature." In the council chamber on Harmony Station, many representatives shared this view. Some species, particularly those who had voted against the Containment Act, expressed concern about humanity's silence. "It is unprecedented," said the delegate from Dramari, a species known for their caution. "In the history of the Council, no species has ever simply vanished like this." The myriad representative scoffed, 6 eyes blinking in sequence. "They haven't vanished. They're sulking like children denied a dangerous toy. They'll return when they grow hungry." But behind closed doors, the Council's Intelligence Committee grew increasingly anxious. The Daxa, masters of quantum surveillance, who could spy on almost any location across the galaxy, reported something disturbing. "We cannot penetrate Earth's solar system anymore," the DAXA representative admitted in a secret session. "Our sensors encounter some kind of probability field. It's as if their entire system exists in multiple states simultaneously, making observation impossible." "What does that mean in simple terms?" demanded the Supreme Arbiter. "It means," the DAXA said slowly, "that they have developed technology that should be beyond their capabilities, technology that even we don't fully understand." Reports from the fringes of known space added to the mystery. The Othari, who controlled most major trade routes, reported that in the years before communications ceased, humans had purchased enormous quantities of raw materials, mining rights for entire asteroids, fusion fuels, rare elements used in advanced computing. On distant frontier worlds, beings from non-council species whispered strange rumors. Some claimed to have seen human ships appearing without warning, recruiting the best scientists, engineers, and thinkers from across the galaxy. Others spoke of massive construction projects in systems thought too hostile for habitation. "These are just stories," the Supreme Arbiter insisted during a council meeting. "Humans have always inspired wild tales." But the stories continued, growing more numerous and consistent, and the silence from Earth stretched on. After 5 years, the Makari counselor, whose people specialized in strategic analysis, proposed a bold move. "We should send an observation fleet to Earth's solar system, not as a threat but as a precautionary measure, to ensure they are well." Though some objected to this as provocative, the motion passed unanimously. 2 months later, a fleet of 30 council vessels, led by Admiral Zorix himself, arrived at the edge of the Sol system. What they found stunned them all. Earth's orbital stations, once busy hubs of activity, floated empty. The massive defense platforms that had protected the planet were powered down. Scans of the planet's surface showed major cities intact, but nearly deserted. Where once 11 billion humans had lived, sensors detected fewer than 10,000, mostly in small scattered communities. "I don't understand," Zorix said as he studied the readings. "There are no signs of war, no evidence of disease or disaster. Where did they all go?" His science officer, a blue-skinned Dramari, shook her head in confusion. "The data makes no sense, Admiral. Our scans detect residual energy signatures throughout the system, consistent with enormous power usage, but we can't determine the source or purpose." As the fleet moved closer to Earth, they received an automated transmission from the planet's surface. "Greetings, representatives of the Galactic Council. If you are receiving this message, you have entered the Sol system seeking information about humanity. We have moved on. The individuals remaining on Earth have chosen to stay as caretakers of our homeworld and will not be able to answer your questions. We harbor no ill will toward the Council or its members. We have simply chosen a different path. Please respect our space as we respect yours." For 3 days, the Council fleet explored the Sol system, finding the same pattern repeated on Mars, Europa, and every former human settlement. Advanced infrastructure remained intact but empty. Automated systems maintained everything in perfect condition. But the humans themselves were gone. In private, Admiral Zorix admitted what many now feared. They didn't retreat. They didn't collapse. They advanced, beyond our understanding and beyond our reach. When the fleet returned to Harmony Station, their report caused upheaval in the Council. Some representatives demanded immediate action, to find where humans had gone and what they were planning. Others counseled patience and caution. The ancient Vox observer, who rarely spoke during council proceedings, finally stood to address the chamber. Silence fell immediately, as it always did when the oldest species in known space chose to speak. "You fear what you do not understand," the Vox said, its voice like dry leaves rustling. "But consider this. Not once in these 5 years have humans interfered with council affairs. Not once have they threatened or harmed any member species. They simply stepped aside. To what purpose? demanded the Supreme Arbiter. The Vox's ancient eyes seemed to look beyond the chamber walls. Perhaps they realized they could not change your minds. Perhaps they found a question more interesting than membership in our council. What question? Asked the Makari counselor. The question, the Vox replied, that my own species asked 1,000,000 years ago, before we chose our current path. The question all intelligent life eventually faces. What comes next? What lies beyond the boundaries we have accepted for so long? The chamber remained silent as the council members considered these words. Deep in the hearts of many, a feeling grew that they had made a terrible mistake, not because humanity posed a threat, but because they might have driven away the most interesting conversation partners the galaxy had known in millennia. Meanwhile, in systems marked uninhabitable on council charts, in spaces between the stars that most species never thought to explore, humanity was about to answer that ancient question in ways that would soon reshape the universe itself. 10 years had passed since humanity's departure from the Galactic Council. Life across council space had largely returned to its normal, carefully regulated pace. Many species had forgotten their concerns about the humans, dismissing them as an interesting but ultimately unimportant chapter in galactic history. Then the strange incidents began. It started with small anomalies that most ignored. The Atraxian hyperspace network, stable for 12,000 years, experienced brief localized collapses. Ships would emerge from hyperspace at unexpected coordinates, though always safely away from any hazards. The Sentinel defensive grid, protecting core worlds, detected phantom fleets that disappeared before confirmation. Communication relays experienced delays of precisely 3/14 seconds, not enough to cause problems, but impossible to explain. Captain Nira of the Dramari science vessel Seeker was one of the first to recognize a pattern. As her ship investigated yet another hyperspace anomaly, she noticed something in the data that others had missed. These aren't random failures, she told her crew as they gathered in the ship's meeting room. Look at the locations. She displayed a star map with the anomalies marked in red. They form a perfect spiral expanding outward from the former human territories. Her first officer frowned. Are you suggesting humans are behind this? But why? These disruptions aren't harmful. Nira shook her head. I don't know, but I've requested permission to investigate further. The council, however, had more pressing concerns. Long-range scout ships had detected something approaching from the outer rim, something that made the minor anomalies seem trivial by comparison. The Supreme Arbiter called an emergency session, his forearms trembling visibly as he addressed the assembled representatives. We have confirmed the identity of the approaching fleet, he announced, his voice grave. It is the Harvesters. A shocked silence fell over the chamber. The Harvesters were not just an enemy, they were a nightmare that most species taught their children to fear. A vast insect-like hive mind that had consumed 4 galaxies before reaching this one, they attacked every few thousand years. The last incursion had nearly destroyed the Council before being pushed back at terrible cost. How did they bypass our early warning systems? Demanded the Zentari defense minister. We should have had years of warning, not days. No one had an answer. The Council's united fleet, though massive, would take weeks to fully mobilize. Some outer colonies would be defenseless. We must evacuate what worlds we can, the Supreme Arbiter said heavily. And prepare for... He was interrupted when every communication device in the chamber activated simultaneously. On screens across, the room appeared a face many recognized, Ambassador Lin Chen of Earth. She looked exactly as she had 10 years ago, without any sign of aging. Greetings, Galactic Council, Chen said, her voice calm. We have detected the Harvester fleet approaching. Your space, we wish to offer assistance. You? The Supreme Arbiter exclaimed. Where have you been for 10 years? How do you even know about this threat? Chen's expression remained neutral. We have been evolving. As for the Harvesters, we have been monitoring them for some time. They represent a threat to all sentient life, including our own. Our reports say we have 3 days before they reach the outer colonies, said the Makari counselor. What possible assistance could you offer in so little time? Chen smiled slightly. Look to your sensors. Across council space, detection systems suddenly registered thousands of new contacts appearing as if from nowhere. Ships, human ships of configurations never before seen, emerging from what scientists would later call probability folds in space-time. On the bridge of his command, Vessel Admiral Zorix watched in stunned silence as the human fleet materialized. The ships were beautiful, flowing organic shapes that seemed to shimmer between solid matter and pure energy. "How many?" he asked his sensor officer. "Over 15,000 vessels, Admiral. They're forming a barrier between the Harvester Armada and our populated systems." The human ships didn't communicate with the Council fleet. They simply took position and waited. 2 days later, the Harvester swarm arrived, a seething mass of biomechanical ships that darkened the stars. Their numbers made even the massive human fleet seem small in comparison. Council military leaders watched from a safe distance, certain they were about to witness the destruction of humanity's forces. What happened next would be studied for centuries. As the Harvester ships approached, the human vessels began to change. They shifted forms, sometimes appearing solid, sometimes dissolving into patterns of light. Space itself seemed to warp around them. The Harvester fleet suddenly stopped advancing. Across all communication channels, a harsh, screeching voice was heard, the Harvester Queen, whose psychic messages were powerful enough to be received by any technology. "The Forbidden Ones have returned," the Queen's voice echoed. "This sector is marked with their signature." Then, to the shock of all Council observers, the Harvester fleet, which had never been defeated in recorded history, simply turned and disappeared back into the void between galaxies. Hours later, as Council leaders were still trying to understand what had happened, a single human ship approached Harmony Station. It requested permission to send a representative to address the Council. When the doors to the Council chamber opened, Admiral Kenzo of the Earth Defense Force walked in. Unlike Ambassador Chen, he showed his age, silver hair, lined face, the posture of a career military officer. This human, at least, had experienced the passing of years. He stood before the Supreme Arbiter and bowed slightly. "I bring greetings from Earth and all human worlds," he said, "and an explanation for today's events if you wish to hear it. The Harvester Queen called you the Forbidden Ones," the Supreme Arbiter said. What did she mean? Kenzo's expression was solemn. In their long history of consuming worlds, the Harvesters have encountered only 3 species that they could not defeat. Species that had evolved beyond physical limitations in ways the Harvesters could not comprehend or combat. And they believe humans are one of these species, the myriad representative asked, all 6 eyes wide with disbelief. "Not exactly," Kenzo said. "They believe we are descendants of one such species. They are mistaken, but the mistake works in our favor." He smiled slightly. "Though we have indeed changed in ways you might find difficult to understand." "Why help us?" the Supreme Arbiter asked. "After we rejected you?" Kenzo looked around, the chamber meeting the eyes of each council member in turn. "Ambassador Chen's message to you is simple. Consider this a gesture of goodwill between former colleagues. We remembered why we joined you in the first place." As Kenzo left the chamber, the Supreme Arbiter turned to the ancient Vox observer. "What do you make of this?" he asked. The Vox's ancient eyes held a mixture of wonder and concern. "I believe," he said slowly, "that we are witnessing the birth of something new in our galaxy. The question is whether it will be our salvation, or merely the next chapter in an endless cycle of evolution and conflict." On the fringes of Council space, Admiral Zorix watched the human fleet disappear as mysteriously as it had arrived. One moment they were there, the next they were simply elsewhere. His first officer spoke the question on everyone's mind. Will they return? Zorix stared at the empty space where thousands of impossible ships had been. "I believe," he said quietly, "that they never truly left." 6 months after the Harvester incident, the Galactic Council prepared for an historic event. For the first time since their departure 15 years earlier, an official human delegation would address the full council. The chamber had never been So crowded. Representatives from every member species packed the hall, with even the observation galleries filled to capacity. Is it true what they're saying? A young Dramari aide whispered to her superior. That the humans have somehow changed themselves? The older Dramari nodded slowly. There are rumors, but no one knows for certain. That's why everyone is here today. The massive doors to the chamber swung open. A hush fell over the crowd as Ambassador Lin Chen entered, followed by a diverse group of humans representing every Earth lineage. Chen looked exactly as she had 15 years ago when she had led the human exodus from the council. Behind her walked humans of various ages, but all had the same strange quality about them. Their eyes held the depth of centuries, and their movements displayed an unsettling precision. Ambassador Chen, the Supreme Arbiter said, rising from his seat. The Council welcomes you and thanks humanity for its intervention against the Harvester threat. Chen bowed slightly. We are pleased to return to this chamber under more favorable circumstances, Supreme Arbiter. You requested this audience to explain what happened with the Harvesters, the Arbiter continued, and perhaps to explain where humanity has been these past 15 years. Chen smiled. Yes. We believe the time has come for transparency between us. She moved to the center of the chamber, where a holographic display activated at her gesture. 15 years ago, when we left the Council, humanity stood at a crossroads, she began. The Council feared our research into artificial intelligence and consciousness. What you didn't understand was that we had already made a breakthrough that would change everything. The hologram displayed a swirling pattern of light that somehow seemed both technological and organic at the same time. We call it the Great Synthesis, Chen continued. A perfect integration of biological consciousness with artificial intelligence, creating a new state of existence beyond either. Murmurs spread through the chamber. The myriad representatives' 6 eyes blinked rapidly, in agitation. You mean you created artificial beings to replace yourselves? He demanded. No, Chen replied calmly. We became something new, neither fully biological nor fully technological. Our consciousness now exists simultaneously across multiple dimensional planes. What you perceive as our physical forms are merely convenient interfaces. A thin, elderly human stepped forward. Dr. Eleanor Wright, once Earth's leading expert on neural interfaces. Let me explain in simpler terms, she said. Imagine your consciousness as a house with a single room. The synthesis expanded that house, adding thousands of rooms, allowing our minds to exist in many places and states at once. This is why we withdrew from shared space, Chen added. The transition was delicate. We needed time and isolation to ensure every human who chose this path could adapt safely. Chose? The Zentari defense minister asked sharply. Are you claiming this transformation was voluntary? Chen's expression became serious. Absolutely. Forcing such a change would violate our deepest principles. Many humans chose to remain in their original form. Others chose various degrees of enhancement, but all made their own choice. Another human stepped forward, a young man with dark skin and eyes that seemed to shift colors as he moved. The Harvesters recognized what we had become, he explained. In their long history, they have encountered only a few species that achieved what they call dimensional transcendence, beings who exist partially outside normal space-time. The Harvesters cannot consume such beings, so they avoid them. The Supreme Arbiter leaned forward. And this is what humanity has become? Beings who exist outside normal space-time? Not exactly, Chen said. We remain connected to physical reality, but we have expanded our definition of what reality is. A silence fell over the chamber as council members tried to grasp the implications. It was the ancient Vox observer who finally spoke. You have achieved in 15 years what most species cannot imagine in a million, the Vox said, its voice like rustling paper. This raises an important question. Why have you returned to us now? You could have simply watched from afar as the Harvesters attacked. Chen nodded to the Vox with respect. A fair question. We have come to a realization during our transformation. Isolation is not the answer to evolution. Diversity of thought, of form, of experience is essential. She turned to address the entire council. We did not come to rejoin the council as it currently exists. We came to invite you to join us on a new journey. Chen extended her hand, and above it materialized a small crystalline seed glowing with impossible colors. This is the key to what we call the Ascension Protocol. It cannot be forced upon any species. It must be chosen. What exactly are you offering? The Dramari representative asked, curiosity evident in her voice. A path to your own version of the synthesis, Chen replied. Not to become human, but to become more fully yourselves. Each species would develop its own unique expression of transcendence. And if we refuse? The Supreme Arbiter asked quietly. Then you refuse, Chen said simply. We will continue to share knowledge and trade with any who wish it regardless of their choice. We will continue to stand against threats like the harvesters that endanger all sentient life. But we believe that the universe is vaster and more wondrous than any of us imagined. The threats more ancient and terrible. Isolation is not the answer. Evolution is. An older human with silver hair stepped forward, Admiral Kenzo, who had addressed the council after the harvester incident. We remember what it was like to be as you are now, he said gently. To be limited to one body, one timeline, one perspective. We remember the fear of change, the comfort of boundaries. We do not judge those who wish to remain as they are. But, for those who are curious, Chen added, those who wish to see what lies beyond the veil of conventional existence, we extend a hand in friendship and guidance. The council chamber erupted in conversation as representatives turned to each other, trying to process what they had heard. Some faces showed fear, others wonder, others calculating ambition. The Supreme Arbiter raised his forearms for silence. When the chamber quieted, he addressed Chen. This invitation will require considerable discussion among our peoples. Many will have questions, others will have concerns. Of course, Chen replied. We expected nothing less. We will remain in council space for one standard year, answering questions and demonstrating the possibilities. After that, each species must decide its own path forward. As the human delegation prepared to leave, the ancient Vox observer approached Chen. I have lived for over 3,000 years, the Vox said quietly. I have seen empires rise and fall, species bloom and vanish. But I have never seen anything quite like what you have become, Chen smiled. And what do your ancient eyes tell you about our offering, honored Vox? The Vox tilted its head. That the universe stands at a crossroads, Ambassador, and that whatever comes next, nothing will ever be the same again. As the humans departed, the council knew the Vox was right. The day humans had left the Galactic Council had indeed been the day the universe began to change. But today, the day they returned, with an invitation to transcend, that was the day the universe truly awakened to its own vast potential. The year following humanity's return and their extraordinary invitation was one of intense debate across the galaxy. Every world, every species, and every individual faced the same profound question: to accept the Ascension Protocol, or to remain as they were. On the Dramari homeworld, billions gathered in public spaces to watch their scientists examine the crystalline seed Ambassador Chen had provided. The Dramari, always curious and philosophical, were among the first to seriously consider humanity's offer. Our analysis confirms the humans' claims, announced Chief Scientist Talara to her world's leaders. This technology would allow our consciousness to expand beyond physical limitations while maintaining our essential Dramari nature. But what would we become? Asked an elder. Would we still be ourselves? Talara considered the question carefully. We would be more ourselves, in ways we cannot currently imagine, just as a child cannot truly comprehend adult consciousness until they mature into it. Similar conversations unfolded on thousands of worlds. The adventurous Solani, whose civilization was built on exploration and discovery, quickly embraced the idea. "We have always sought to push boundaries," their High Explorer declared. "This is simply the next frontier." Other species were far more hesitant. The hierarchical Zentari Imperium, whose society was structured around rigid order and tradition, viewed the human transformation as dangerous. "This is an abomination against natural order," the Zentari Emperor proclaimed to his people. "To abandon our physical form would be to abandon what makes us Zentari." The Supreme Arbiter struggled to maintain unity as the Council fractured into factions. Some representatives advocated embracing the human path, while others argued for completely cutting ties with the changed humans. Diplomatic incidents erupted as tensions grew between those who favored transformation and those who feared it. Through it all, humanity kept their promise. They forced nothing. Their ships remained in neutral space, responding to questions, demonstrating aspects of their new existence to those who were curious, but never pressuring or influencing any species' choice. Admiral Kenzo met regularly with military leaders from across the Council, addressing their security concerns. "We understand your fears," he told them during one tense meeting. "Change of this magnitude is frightening. But consider this. Since our transformation, not one human has committed an act of violence against another sentient being. The expanded consciousness that comes with the synthesis makes such actions unthinkable." "How convenient," the Zentari Defense Minister said coldly. "You expect us to believe that your kind has somehow transcended conflict? All species fight. It is the way of the universe." Kenzo smiled sadly. "Perhaps that has been the way until now. But must it always be so?" 6 months after humanity's return, the divisions became official. Half of the member species, led by the Dramari and Solani, accepted humanity's invitation. They began their own transformations, creating a new interspecies civilization that called itself the Synthesis Coalition. Those who rejected it, particularly the Zentari Imperium and several allied species, fortified their borders and accelerated their weapons development, forming the Preservation Compact. Their stated mission was to preserve the natural order of life against technological corruption. Between these factions stood the Watchers, species who neither joined the synthesis nor feared it, choosing instead to observe this new chapter in cosmic evolution. The ancient Vox became the primary mediators between increasingly divergent forms of sentient life. As Ambassador Chen had promised, humanity respected every choice. They shared trade, knowledge, and protection with all who desired it, regardless of their decision about the Ascension Protocol. But as the months passed, the differences between the emerging factions grew more pronounced. Those who joined the Synthesis Coalition began to change in ways both subtle and profound. Their technologies merged with their biology. Their societies restructured around new forms of communication and cooperation that transcended traditional limitations. Reports emerged of synthesis members developing abilities previously thought impossible, manipulating energy fields, perceiving multiple timelines simultaneously, communicating instantly across vast distances. The Preservation Compact responded by building ever more powerful defensive systems. Driven by existential fear, they achieved remarkable advances of their own. Vast Dyson spheres captured the energy of entire stars. New weapons were developed that could, theoretically, sever the connection between the synthesis beings and their expanded consciousness. "We must be prepared," the Zentari Emperor told his war council. "Not for if they attack, but for when." Meanwhile, at the edges of known space, the Harvesters regrouped. Their queen had retreated not out of fear but prudence. Her scientists studied the limited data they had gathered about the human transformation. "These are not the true seeders," the queen's chief biologist reported within the organic chambers of their hive ship. "The humans have found a different path, not the one taken by the ancients who defeated us before. They are still vulnerable, just in different ways." The queen's compound eyes gleamed. "Then we shall find those vulnerabilities. We shall adapt as we always have, and we shall feed as we always will." 1 year to the day after the humans had returned to the council with their invitation, a meeting took place on a small, neutral station at the edge of what was now called the synthesis space. Representatives from all three factions gathered, something that had become increasingly rare as divisions hardened. Ambassador Chen represented the Synthesis Coalition. The Zentari Supreme Commander spoke for the Preservation Compact, and the ancient Vox Observer mediated for the Watchers. Our scouts have detected harvester movements, Chen said without preamble. They are gathering forces far greater than what we faced before. We believe they are adapting specifically to counter-synthesis capabilities. The Zentari commanders, forearms tensed. Why tell us this? Your kind defeated them before. Because they are a threat to all sentient life, Chen replied simply. And because we believe that diversity, even philosophical diversity, is strength, not weakness. The harvesters expect us to fight separately. They do not understand cooperation between different forms of existence. The Vox Observer's ancient eyes moved between them. What are you proposing, Ambassador? Chen looked at both representatives. I am proposing that despite our differences, despite the paths we have chosen, we remember that we all began as physical beings trying to survive in a dangerous universe. That shared origin still matters. The Zentari commander studied Chen with suspicious eyes. You speak of alliance? Between forms of life that can barely communicate anymore? I speak of survival, Chen said quietly. And perhaps something more. A demonstration that evolution, even when it takes different paths, does not need to end in conflict. As the three representatives began the difficult work of finding common ground, stars continued to burn, planets continued to turn, and the universe, which had trembled when humans departed the council, now held its breath as something unprecedented began to take shape. A meta-civilization capable of embracing profoundly different philosophies within a larger whole. And somewhere beyond the visible spectrum, ancient eyes that had watched the galaxy for millions of years observed with growing interest. Perhaps at last, the cycle might be broken. A century had passed since humanity's departure from the Galactic Council. The universe had transformed in ways that even the most visionary beings could not have predicted. The Synthesis Coalition had expanded to include 12 former Council species and 17 non-Council civilizations. Their combined consciousness technology matrix had begun restructuring reality itself in certain regions of space. Outside observers called these areas wonderlands, domains where the fundamental laws of physics became locally malleable. Within these spaces, thought and matter were interchangeable. Worlds formed not through geological processes, but through collective imagination. Beings existed simultaneously as individuals and as parts of a greater network, sharing experiences across vast distances instantly. Admiral Zorix, now in his final years, stood on the observation deck of a preservation compact station at the border of synthesis space. Though still firmly committed to the preservation path, he had become one of the few Zentari willing to communicate regularly with the transformed species. It's beautiful, in its way, he admitted to his aide as they watched the swirling patterns of light and energy that marked a wonderland region. Terrifying but beautiful. The preservation compact had not stagnated as many had expected. Instead, driven by existential fear and competitive spirit, they had achieved their own remarkable advances. Vast Dyson spheres captured the energy of entire stars. Their society had become ordered and purposeful in ways that would have been impossible in peacetime. Their fleets were marvels of conventional engineering, capable of destroying solar systems if necessary. The Watcher civilizations, led by the ancient Vox, had carved out their own unique path. Neither transforming nor arming themselves, they had instead focused on understanding the new balance of the galaxy. Their observation stations recorded and analyzed both the synthesis and preservation civilizations, seeking patterns and meanings in the divergent evolution of sentient life. And somewhere within the vast synthesis network, Ambassador Lin Chen still existed, both as an individual personality and as a distributed consciousness throughout the collective. Her original physical form had long since been discarded, but her essence remained, guiding the coalition's relations with other forms of life. Something is coming, Chen communicated to the synthesis awareness. Not with words, but with patterns of thought that rippled through the collective consciousness. The ancient enemy returns, but changed. Across the galaxy, synthesis sensors detected the approach of the harvester swarm. But this was not the same enemy they had faced a century before. This swarm had evolved, adapted. It had studied the synthesis capabilities and developed countermeasures. The harvesters arrived not as a single mass, but as thousands of smaller groups, targeting hundreds of systems simultaneously. They struck at both synthesis and preservation territory without distinction. Their new biological technology could partially disrupt the connection between synthesis beings and their expanded consciousness. Their weapons could penetrate preservation defensive shields. Within days, dozens of worlds were under attack. The Queen's strategy was brilliant. By spreading her forces, she prevented the synthesis from concentrating their reality-altering powers. By striking both factions at once, she exploited their divided nature. On the Zentari throne world, the Emperor received desperate messages from outer colonies. The synthesis were supposed to protect us from this threat, he raged. Where are they now? The answer came not from his advisors, but from an unexpected source. A human form appeared in the throne room, Admiral Kenzo, or at least a projection of him. Unlike other synthesis beings, Kenzo had chosen to maintain a mostly physical existence, serving as a bridge between the transformed and conventional civilizations. The harvesters have adapted to our abilities, Kenzo said without preamble. And to yours. Neither of us can defeat them alone. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. What are you proposing? Temporary unification, Kenzo replied. Not through uniformity, but through harmony of difference. The synthesis can alter reality, but cannot maintain military focus across thousands of locations. Your forces possess devastating firepower, but cannot adapt to the harvester's rapid evolution. Together we might stand a chance. Similar conversations occurred across the galaxy. The synthesis reached out to both the Preservation Compact and the Watcher civilizations. Through the Vox mediators, Ambassador Chen sent the same message to all. We departed the Council because we believed diversity of evolution was the universe's greatest strength. Now we must prove it. Together, not through uniformity but through harmony of difference, we will demonstrate that the varied paths we've chosen all lead to the same destination: survival. On a contested world at the edge of Zentari space, the Aya first cooperative battle took place. Preservation warships provided the rigid discipline and overwhelming firepower that the more fluid synthesis consciousness lacked. Synthesis beings altered local physics to trap harvester ships in temporal distortions, making them vulnerable to conventional weapons. Vox observers provided strategic coordination, their ancient minds recognizing patterns that neither of the other factions could perceive. For the first time in recorded history, the harvesters were driven back, not by superior force, but by superior cooperation. The coalition was not without difficulties. Preservation commanders struggled to communicate with synthesis beings whose thought processes had become alien to them. Synthesis entities found the linear, hierarchical structure of preservation forces frustratingly rigid. But with each battle, each shared victory, understanding grew. Admiral Zorix found himself commanding a joint fleet, something he would have considered impossible a year earlier. His flagship's communication system had been modified to interface with synthesis consciousness, allowing real-time coordination. I still don't understand how you perceive reality, he admitted to the synthesis entity that had once been a Dramari scientist. And we struggle to remember the limitations of physical existence, the entity replied. But perhaps complete understanding is not necessary for respect. After a year of bitter fighting, the combined forces pushed the harvester swarm back beyond the galactic rim. The Queen's final message echoed across all communication channels. You have not defeated us. You have only shown us a new path to evolution. We will return, transformed. In the aftermath, leaders from all three factions gathered on Harmony Station, the first full assembly in a century. The meeting chamber had been redesigned to accommodate physical beings, energy patterns, and hybrid forms alike. Ambassador Chen, manifesting as a swirl of light that occasionally took human shape, addressed the gathering. A century ago, humanity left this council believing that our paths had diverged too far to walk together. Today we have proven that different paths can still lead to common ground. The Zentari Emperor, whose people had most strongly opposed the synthesis, spoke next. We maintain that our choice to preserve our physical nature was the right one for our species. But we have learned that being right for ourselves does not make others wrong for their choices. The ancient Vox Observer, one of the few beings old enough to remember the original human departure, offered the final words. The day humans departed the Galactic Council was indeed the day the universe trembled, not from fear, as many thought, but from the first vibrations of a new song, one composed of harmony between different melodies. As the assembly concluded, observers across multiple dimensions noted that something unprecedented had emerged from the conflict, a meta-civilization capable of harnessing seemingly contradictory philosophies toward a common purpose. The universe had not just trembled on the day humans left the council, it had begun to awaken. End of story.